a $75,000 diamond bracelet. That's what Harry Williams was holding when he discovered his fiancée's plan to rob him blind. But what Stella didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the woman who would truly change Harry's life was already under his roof. Quiet, overlooked, wearing a blue maid's uniform. Hello friends, welcome. Before we begin, subscribe, leave a like and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Now let's get into it. It was a Wednesday evening when everything changed. Harry left the office early, something he almost never did. Inside his jacket sat a velvet box he'd been hiding for 3 months, a diamond bracelet, $75,000, handpicked for Stella Whitemore, the woman he planned to marry in 21 days. He stepped through the front door, already rehearsing his words. But the living room door was cracked open, and Stella's voice stopped him cold. "You actually think I love this man?" She was laughing, the kind of laugh that didn't care who heard it. "Linda, Harry is painfully boring, profit margins and 5 a.m. meetings. Being with him is like dating a calculator." Harry's grip tightened on the velvet box until his knuckles ached. 3 weeks, Linda, her voice dropped lower, almost proud. "I say I do, and my lawyer already has the paperwork. Half of everything, the buildings, the accounts, becomes mine. After that, I live the life I was always meant to live." The bracelet suddenly felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. Not because of its price, because it was a $75,000 love letter to a woman who never loved him back. Most men would have stormed through that door, but Harry didn't build a billion-dollar empire by reacting on impulse. He backed away silently, walked to his study and picked up the phone. What he did next would unravel everything. And the person who would piece him back together. She was downstairs washing his dishes, praying she could afford her mother's medication this month. That morning, Harry Williams woke at 5 like he always did. The mansion was still dark. Stella was still asleep, her silk bonnet pulled low, one arm draped over the pillow where his head had been. He watched her for a moment, the soft rise and fall of her breathing, the faint curve of her lips, and felt the same quiet gratitude he felt every morning. This woman chose him. Out of everyone, she chose him. He laced up his running shoes and stepped into the cold air, 5 miles through empty streets before the city woke up. By 6:30 he was showered, dressed, and sitting at his desk reviewing quarterly projections for Williams Industries. Profit margins were strong. 3 new developments were breaking ground next month, but none of that mattered as much as the small velvet box locked in his office drawer. He had ordered the bracelet 12 weeks ago from a private jeweler in Zurich. 18 diamonds set in white gold, each one chosen individually. The jeweler had asked who it was for, and Harry had said, "The woman I'm spending the rest of my life with." He meant every word. That afternoon he left the office 2 hours early. His assistant gave him a curious look because Harry Williams never left early. He drove home with the box sitting on the passenger seat like a living thing, rehearsing the moment in his head, how he would find Stella in the kitchen, maybe pouring wine, how he would slide the bracelet across the counter and watch her eyes light up. He had even practiced what he would say, something simple, something real. 21 more days. "Then it's you and me forever." He never got to say it. The front door was unlocked. The hallway smelled like her perfume, vanilla and jasmine, the scent that used to make his chest feel warm. Now, standing outside that cracked living room door, it made his stomach turn. Because Stella's voice was filling the room, and the woman she was describing was not the woman Harry knew. He wakes up at 5 in the morning to run Linda. 5, like some kind of army recruit. She laughed. And then he comes home and talks about profit margins like I'm supposed to care. I just nod and smile, that's it. Nod and smile. Harry pressed his back against the hallway wall. The velvet box felt like a stone in his hand. "The man has no flavor," Stella continued, her voice dripping with amusement. "No excitement, but he has accounts that don't end, so I play the part. 3 more weeks of pretending and I'll never have to pretend again." He stood there for what felt like an hour but was probably only a minute. The hallway was dark. The house was beautiful. And the life he thought he was building had just cracked down the center like cheap glass. Harry looked down at the bracelet one last time, then walked silently toward his study and closed the door behind him. Harry didn't sleep that night. He lay beside Stella in the dark, listening to her breathe, wondering how someone could sound so peaceful while carrying that much deception inside them. She shifted once, curling into his arm, and whispered something soft in her sleep. He stared at the ceiling and felt nothing. By morning, he had made his decision. He called Marcus Dean at 7:15. Marcus had been his lawyer for 9 years, the only man in Harry's circle who had known him before the money, back when Williams Industries was just a name on a lease agreement for a one-room office. Marcus didn't ask questions on the phone. He simply said, "My office, 10 o'clock, come through the back entrance." Harry arrived in a baseball cap and sunglasses, which felt ridiculous, but the last thing he needed was a photograph circulating before the plan was ready. Marcus was already waiting, 2 coffees on the desk, his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. "You sounded terrible on the phone," Marcus said. "I need you to make me broke," Harry replied. Marcus set down his coffee. "Define broke." "Publicly bankrupt, total collapse. I want every headline in this city to say that Williams Industries is finished and that Harry Williams has lost everything." He paused. "But on paper, real paper, nothing changes. The assets stay protected. The accounts stay full. I just need the world to believe the money is gone." Marcus studied him for a long time. "This is about Stella." Harry didn't answer immediately. He looked at the window at the skyline he had helped build, towers with his name buried in their foundations. Then he said, "I heard her on the phone yesterday. She's marrying my bank account, Marcus, not me. She has a lawyer, she has a plan. 3 weeks after the wedding, she walks away with half of everything I've built." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "So you want to remove the money and see what's left?" "I want to see her real face, the one she hides when she thinks I'm watching." For the next 2 hours they built the lie piece by piece. A leaked financial report showing catastrophic losses, frozen accounts, cancelled credit lines. Marcus would plant the story through a contact at a business journal, something credible, something Stella would find on her own without Harry needing to say a word. The timing had to be perfect, public enough to be believed, quiet enough to be reversed without permanent damage. When they finished, Marcus walked him to the back door and put a hand on his shoulder. "And if she stays, Harry, if she proves you wrong?" Harry stopped in the doorway. The morning sun hit his face, and for just a moment he looked like a man who wanted desperately to lose this bet. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to her," he said. "But she won't stay. I heard her voice, Marcus. That woman has already left." The story hit on a Friday morning. Marcus had chosen the day carefully, markets closing, news cycles hungry, people scrolling through headlines with their weekend coffee. By 9 o'clock it was everywhere. Williams Industries faces catastrophic collapse, billionaire mogul's empire on the brink. The words looked strange to Harry, like reading his own obituary while still breathing. He sat in his study with the door locked, watching his phone. That was the real test. Not the headlines, not the stock tickers, not the carefully fabricated financial reports sitting in journalist inboxes across the city. The test was the phone. At 9:15 it was still ringing. Richard Carey, his golf partner of 6 years, called twice. Harry let it go to voicemail. The message was short, almost clinical. "Harry, just saw the news. Listen, I hope everything works out. Let me know if there's anything I can." The sentence trailed off like Richard had forgotten how to finish it. By noon the calls started thinning. The group chat he shared with his college friends, men who had toasted him at every milestone, who had flown on his jet to the Maldives last summer, went completely silent. No messages, no check-ins, not even the awkward "thinking of you" text that costs nothing to send. Harry scrolled through his contacts, 237 names. People who had attended his birthday gala 4 months ago, who had laughed at his jokes with champagne in their hands, who had called him brother in front of cameras. He set the phone face down on the desk and waited. By Saturday evening, only 3 people had reached out. Marcus, who called to confirm the story was holding. His mother in Charlotte, who had never cared about money and simply said, "Come home if you need to, baby." And Eunice, his maid, who had knocked on the study door that afternoon and quietly asked if he wanted dinner brought up. Everyone else had vanished, like smoke, like they had never existed at all. The silence was louder than Harry expected. He had prepared himself for Stella's reaction, that was the whole point of the plan. But he hadn't prepared for this. The emptiness of a phone that used to ring 30 times a day now, sitting still as a dead thing on his desk. The realization that 234 people had weighed his friendship against his financial collapse and decided he wasn't worth a single phone call. Sunday morning, Harry stood at his bedroom window looking out at the long driveway. No cars, no visitors. The gates were closed, and the world on the other side of them had moved on as though Harry Williams had never mattered at all. He picked up the phone one more time, stared at the blank screen and set it down gently. Then he whispered something to the empty room that no one heard. Now I know. Stella didn't mention the news on Friday. She didn't mention it on Saturday either. Harry watched her move through the mansion like nothing had changed, refilling her wine glass, scrolling through her phone, humming softly while she ran a bath. He wondered if she simply hadn't seen the headlines yet, or if she was waiting for him to say it first. By Sunday evening he had his answer. She walked into the study without knocking. Her phone was in her hand, the screen bright, an article pulled up with his name in bold letters across the top. Her face looked different, not sad, not worried, something harder, something he had never seen directed at him before. "Tell me this isn't real," she said. Harry looked up from his desk slowly. "It's real." "What do you mean it's real?" Her voice climbed immediately, skipping past concern and landing directly on accusation. "How does a man lose everything overnight, Harry? How does that even happen?" He kept his voice even. "Markets shifted, investments collapsed, it happens, Stella." "It happens," she laughed, not the light, playful laugh he used to love, but something sharp and brittle, like glass breaking on tile. "It happens to careless people. It happens to people who don't pay attention. You told me Williams Industries was untouchable. You told me we were set for life." Harry noticed the word immediately. We, not him. We were set for life. As though his empire had always been a joint venture, and she was the silent partner now demanding an explanation for her losses. "I'm handling it," he said quietly. "Marcus is working on." "Marcus," she cut him off, packing now, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "Marcus is your lawyer, not a magician. Can he bring back the accounts? Can he undo whatever stupid decisions you made that got us here?" There it was, the word she had been circling around. Stupid. She let it land without flinching, without apology, the way someone drops something they never valued in the first place. Harry said nothing. He just watched her, the tight jaw, the flared nostrils, the way her eyes kept darting around the study like she was mentally appraising what could still be sold. Stella grabbed her car keys from the hallway table and pulled her jacket off the hook. "I need to think," she said, not looking at him. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days. I can't be here right now. I can't look at this house knowing it might not even be ours anymore." She didn't ask if he was okay. She didn't touch his hand or meet his eyes or say any of the words that people say when someone they love is falling apart. She just walked out, her heels echoing down the hallway until the front door opened, closed, and left the mansion in silence. Harry listened to her car pull away and realized he felt nothing. That scared him more than anything Stella had ever said. The mansion was dark when Eunice came downstairs that evening. She had finished cleaning the upstairs bedrooms, a routine she kept even though half the rooms hadn't been used in weeks. She noticed the study door was open, which was unusual. Harry always kept it closed. She almost walked past, but something made her stop. A sound, not crying exactly, but the kind of breathing that comes after crying has already finished its work. She found him sitting on the floor behind his desk, his back against the wall. His tie loosened, staring at nothing. The lamp was off. The only light came from the hallway behind her, casting a thin gold line across the carpet. "Mr. Williams," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes were dry but heavy, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. "Eunice, you should have gone home hours ago." "I had extra work to finish." She paused in the doorway, reading the room the way she had learned to read rooms since childhood, quickly, carefully, without assuming she was welcome. "Can I bring you something?" Harry exhaled slowly. "Eunice, I need to be honest with you. Things are bad. The company, the accounts, I can't pay your salary right now. I don't know when I'll be able to again." He looked at her directly, and she could see it cost him something to say the next words. "I'm letting you go, I'm sorry." Eunice stood very still. She didn't gasp or argue or ask questions. She simply nodded once, as though she had been expecting weather like this her whole life and had long ago stopped being surprised by storms. "I understand," she said. Then she turned and walked toward the kitchen. 20 minutes later, she came back carrying a small tray, a bowl of soup, warm bread, and a glass of water. She set it on the desk gently and sat down in the chair across from him, not waiting to be invited. Harry stared at the tray. "I just told you I can't pay you." "You did," she said, "and this isn't work. This is just a person feeding another person who looks like he hasn't eaten all day." He picked up the spoon because he didn't know what else to do. The soup was simple, vegetables and herbs, nothing expensive, but it was warm and it was real, and that combination almost broke him more than Stella's exit had. My mother got sick when I was 16, Eunice said quietly, watching him eat. Kidney failure. My father had already left. I dropped out of school, cleaned houses during the day, washed dishes at a restaurant at night. Some weeks we ate rice and salt for dinner, nothing else. She folded her hands in her lap. But we never stopped sitting at that table together, because the meal was never really about the food, Mr. Williams. It was about not letting someone eat alone. Harry set the spoon down and looked at her, truly looked at her, for what felt like the first time. Thank you, Eunice, he said. She gave him a small, quiet smile. Good night, Mr. Williams. She left the way she always did, without noise, without ceremony, without asking for anything in return. And Harry sat in the dark with an empty bowl, realizing that the most valuable thing left in his mansion had just walked out the door on her own 2 feet. Marcus was the one who told him, not with words at first, just a photograph texted without comment. Stella sitting at a window table in a cafe downtown, her hand resting on the arm of a man Harry recognized immediately. Victor Ashford, commercial banking, old money. The kind of man who wore his wealth like cologne, impossible to miss, impossible to ignore. Harry stared at the photograph for a long time. Her hair was down, the way she only wore it when she wanted to be noticed. She was laughing, not the sharp, brittle laugh from the study. The other one. The one Harry used to believe was only for him. He put on a plain jacket, no watch, no driver, and took a cab downtown. He didn't know what he planned to say. He just knew he needed to see it with his own eyes, because photographs can lie but faces sitting 3 feet away cannot. He found them exactly where Marcus said they would be. Corner table, afternoon light, 2 glasses of wine that probably cost more than Eunice made in a week. Stella saw him first. Her expression didn't shift to guilt or surprise. It shifted to irritation, the look someone gives a stain that won't come out. Harry, she said his name the way you say a word you've already decided to stop using. Can we talk? He asked. Victor leaned back in his chair, unbothered, stirring his drink like he was watching a scene that had nothing to do with him. Stella glanced at Victor, then back at Harry, and something in that glance told Harry everything. She had already explained him, already reduced him to a story, the ex who lost it all, the cautionary tale, the man she was smart enough to leave behind. She stood and walked him to the sidewalk outside, arms crossed, jaw tight. The cafe windows were behind her. Victor was still visible, checking his phone. What do you want, Harry? I want to understand, he said. 2 weeks ago you were picking wedding flowers, now you're sitting with another man like I never existed. Stella tilted her head, studying him the way someone studies a question they find almost amusing. You don't exist anymore, Harry, not the version of you that mattered. She let the words settle. I loved what you built, I loved the life you could give me, you lost that, so what exactly am I supposed to hold on to? Me, he said, just the word, nothing else. She almost smiled, almost. You without the money are just a man with early mornings and boring conversations. She reached into her purse, pulled off the engagement ring and held it out to him. Find someone who wants that, I don't. Harry took the ring, it was still warm from her finger. She walked back inside without looking back, sat down across from Victor, and picked up her wine glass like the last 4 minutes had never happened. Harry stood on the sidewalk holding a ring that no longer meant anything, and realized that it never had. Eunice's day started at 4:30 in the morning and ended somewhere around midnight, though she had stopped keeping track. Counting the hours only made them heavier. Her first job began at 5, cleaning rooms at the Ridgemont Hotel on the east side of the city. 16 rooms per shift, each one stripped, scrubbed, and reassembled before the next guest checked in. She moved through them quickly and quietly, the way she moved through everything, leaving no trace of herself behind except the faint smell of disinfectant and neatly folded towels. By 2 in the afternoon, she was at her second job, helping Mrs. Adebayo run a small catering kitchen that supplied lunch trays to 2 office buildings downtown. Eunice chopped, packed, labeled, and delivered. Her arms ached by 4 o'clock, but she never mentioned it, because Mrs. Adebayo was 71 and still standing, which meant Eunice had no right to sit. Then came the mansion. She still went every evening, even though Harry had formally let her go. She told herself it was just to check, just to make sure the house hadn't fallen apart, just to see if the man inside it had eaten something. But the truth was simpler than that. Harry Williams was alone, and Eunice knew what alone felt like when the world had decided you weren't worth the trouble. She would arrive around 5:30, let herself in through the side door, and move through the kitchen without turning on the main lights. Some nights she brought food from the catering kitchen, whatever Mrs. Adebayo let her take home. Other nights she made something small from whatever was left in the pantry. She would set the plate outside the study door, knock once, and leave before he could argue about it. Harry tried to stop her twice. The first time he told her she didn't owe him anything. She said, "I know." The second time he asked her why she kept coming. She looked at him for a moment, then said, "Because my mother taught me that you don't walk past someone who's hungry just because feeding them isn't your job anymore." He didn't ask again. At 9 o'clock each night, Eunice took a bus to her third job, cleaning offices at a corporate building on 5th and Waller. Empty hallways, fluorescent lights, trash bins and vacuum lines. She listened to nothing while she worked. No music, no podcasts, just the rhythm of her own movement and the quiet math running through her head: rent, medication, electricity, food. Her mother's prescription had gone up again. The numbers never balanced, but Eunice kept working them like a prayer she refused to stop repeating. She got home around 12:30, hung her jacket on the back of the kitchen chair and checked on her mother, who was usually asleep by then, breathing shallow and slow beneath a thin blanket. Eunice would stand in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, making sure. Then she set her alarm for 4:30 and closed her eyes. Harry put on the suit slowly, like a man dressing for a funeral he had already grieved. The charcoal Tom Ford, the silver cufflinks, the watch he had locked away the night the story broke. He stood in front of the mirror and looked at the man staring back, the same man who had sat on the floor of his study in the dark, who had eaten soup from a maid's hands, who had stood on a sidewalk holding a ring that still carried the warmth of a woman who never loved him. Same man, different eyes. Marcus had arranged everything. The financial journals would publish corrections by morning. Williams Industries was intact, stronger in fact than before the hoax began, accounts unfrozen, credit lines restored. The empire had never fallen, it had simply held its breath. But before the world found out, Harry had one stop to make. He found Stella at her sister's apartment. She opened the door in a silk robe, coffee in hand, and when she saw him, the suit, the watch, the posture of a man who still owned the skyline, her face went through every emotion except the one that mattered. Relief, confusion, then something quick and sharp behind her eyes, like a calculator switching back on. "Harry," she scanned him head to toe, "what is this?" "It was a test, Stella." She blinked. "What?" "The bankruptcy, the collapse, none of it was real." He said it calmly, the way you deliver news that no longer has the power to hurt you. "I needed to see what you would do when the money disappeared. Now I know." He watched the understanding move across her face like weather, the slow dawning, the tightening jaw, the moment her eyes shifted from confusion to something close to fury. "You lied to me." Her voice shook, but not from sadness. From the realization that she had shown her hand to a man who had been watching the whole time. "You lied first," Harry said. "I just gave you the room to prove it." She started to speak, something sharp, something defensive, but Harry was already stepping back from the door. There was nothing left to hear. He had loved a version of Stella that never existed, and she had loved a version of him that was only numbers on a screen. They were even. He drove to the mansion and found Eunice in the kitchen, exactly where he knew she would be, wiping down counters she hadn't been paid to touch in weeks. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and her eyes moved to the suit, the watch, the expression on his face. She didn't gasp. She didn't ask what happened. She simply stood very still, dish towel in her hands, waiting. "Your mother," Harry said. "What hospital is she in?" Eunice told him. "She's being transferred tonight, best specialists in the state, everything covered." He paused. "And Eunice, you're done cleaning, you're done working 3 jobs, that's over." She opened her mouth, closed it, and looked down at the dish towel in her hands like she didn't know what to do with them anymore. "Why?" she whispered. Harry looked at her, the woman who had fed him when she could barely feed herself, who had shown up every night without being asked, who had never once looked at him and seen a bank account. "Because you stayed," he said, "and that's worth more than anything I've ever built." Eunice's mother came home on a Tuesday, not to the small apartment with the thin blankets and the kitchen chair where Eunice used to hang her jacket at midnight. To a new home, a quiet house with a garden, warm floors, and a room where the sunlight reached the bed by morning. Eunice stood in the doorway watching her mother sleep that first night, the same way she always had, making sure she was breathing. But for the first time in years, the breathing was steady, deep, unafraid. Harry didn't propose right away. He wasn't that man anymore, the one who rushed toward love with velvet boxes and rehearsed speeches. Instead, he learned Eunice the way you learn something you want to understand, not something you want to own. He learned that she drank her tea without sugar, that she hummed while she cooked but stopped the moment she realized someone was listening. That she read the same book of poems her mother had given her when she was 14, the spine cracked and soft from years of returning to the same pages. He learned that she was afraid of being a burden, that she had carried weight her entire life and didn't know how to set it down without feeling guilty. That when he told her she deserved good things, she would look away, not because she disagreed, but because no one had ever said it out loud before. 6 months after the reveal, they launched the Williams-Johnson Foundation. Eunice chose the name. Harry wanted to call it something grand, something with marble in the title, but Eunice shook her head. People who need help don't need marble, she said. They need to see a name that looks like theirs. The foundation started small scholarships for single mothers finishing school, medical funds for families drowning in hospital bills, job training for people who had been told their whole lives that they weren't qualified for anything better. Eunice reviewed every application personally. She said she could spot the ones who just needed a chance because she recognized the handwriting, not the letters, but the exhaustion between the lines. The careful, desperate neatness of someone trying to prove they were worth believing in. Harry proposed on a Sunday morning. No velvet box, no rehearsed speech, just the two of them sitting on the porch of her mother's new house, tea going cold between them, watching the garden do nothing in particular. He said, "I spent my whole life building things other people could see. You're the first thing that made me want to build something only I can feel." Eunice looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Yes," quietly. Like she had been holding the word for months, and had simply been waiting for the right place to set it down. The wedding was small. Her mother was there, sitting in the front row, breathing steady. And Harry Williams, the man who once measured his worth in billions, stood at the altar and realized the most valuable thing he owned was the hand he was holding.